Joining us now to talk about the surge in African mega projects is Dave van Merwe. He's an Associate Director at Deloitte. Good to have you with us today, Dave. Maybe walk us through this particular survey and that has been conducted by Deloitte. What kind of projects are we looking at here and the size from that perspective?
Thank you. Yes, so what we try and track is the large construction projects across the African continent. And typically what the projects that we would include are those that are greater than $50 billion. So in other words, $50 million, which is a 500 million rand project. What we've seen is that there's been a decline in the total number of projects on the African continent tracking from last year to this year. A decline of 65 projects from 300, just over 300. And the total spend has increased to offset the drop in projects. So that is telling us that the size of the projects on the African continent are certainly increasing.
Dave, Lindsay Williams in Cape Town. What's the lead time on these projects? I mean, the reason I ask that question is because with the oil price and the commodity prices worldwide coming down over the last 6 or 7 months, obviously you can't just say, well, I've started to break ground here on this project and I'm going to stop now. So when did the decline start? Were people prophetic when they stopped these projects because of their not Afro-pessimism, but certainly their caution on the African continent's growth?
Yes, the lead time on some of these projects can be extremely long, anything from 1 or 2 years up to 4 or 5 years. So it's not just a question of just switching off projects. It's not that easy, and certainly not on some of the mega projects. However, what we have seen is quite a big increase in energy and transport in particular on the African continent, picking up a lot of those projects. We have seen quite a marked decline in the number of mining projects, which is a clear indication of the downturn in the commodity cycles around the world, and that is pushing down the number of mining projects that are coming to the fore. So whether it's prophetic, difficult to say, but certainly a decrease in there. I think what is encouraging from the African continent and the various projects is the increase in the transport. And under transport we would include particularly rail and ports as the two biggest contributors, but also road and airports. And that is certainly a big indicator that some of the key infrastructure that's required on the continent is starting to be put into place, and that construction is starting on those. And also quite interesting with a lot of the transport is the size and the scale of the regional integration which is taking place. We've seen that with the Lapset corridor in East Africa and the Grand Inga project for energy in Central Africa. So certainly Africa is starting to work together towards a bigger macro view of the continent and getting that regional integration going.
Dave, on energy and power, are we literally just scratching the tip of the iceberg given the fact that we have so many natural resources that we've been blessed with?
Gugu, yes, I think so. There is an awful lot of energy that's still required in the African continent. What is interesting is that some of the things that are coming through in the pipeline, the projects, certainly are indicating that scale is starting to get significantly bigger, and that a lot of the governments are starting to think about the bigger picture. So if we just take the opportunities for power in Ethiopia and Kenya together, they're looking at about 18,000 megawatts, which is approximately half of what we've got in South Africa. So the scale is certainly increasing, but we need a lot more energy.
Dave, more than 10% of the projects, it says here, included in this year's surveys were structured as PPPs, private-public partnerships, which is an increase from about 4% in the previous year. Where's the money coming from? Where's the private money coming from? Are African projects being funded by South Africa? Are they being funded by overseas companies, the United States, Europe, wherever it is? Tell us where the money's coming from.
The money is coming essentially from two key players. Governments are still funding quite a big chunk of that across the African continent, but also the donor funding is certainly a big contributor towards putting into place a lot of the infrastructure on the continent. So the donor funding, and along with that goes quite a lot of construction that's actually being done by companies out of the United States, out of Europe, and places like Brazil and China. So certainly funding is coming from those two. The private sector funding has declined from what we've seen in the previous year.
On the government, though, it does seem as though that they are really trailblazing and leading this level of infrastructure development. Does it vary from the different governments on the continent? Because we recently had our budget speech, and Finance Minister Nhlanhla didn't say too much about infrastructure spend.
Yes, I think there is an element of spend taking place when the Minister talks about approximately 1 billion spent over a 3-year period. And if you break that down into into 3 years, there's about 300 odd billion that's going in each year. So that is currently taking place. I think the big constraint for governments is really funding. And I think in order to get the kind of growth and job creation opportunities that we need to get, we will need a quantum step forward in terms of the amount of infrastructure spend that's allocated from various budgets. So I think there is still a big challenge on the continent to actually match up the demand, the opportunities with bankable feasibilities so that construction can actually take place.
Sounds like we need to say, show me the money then, to see a significant increase in infrastructure spend. Thank you so much for your time today, Dave. That was Dave van der Merwe, who joins us from Deloitte.